Welcome to a special edition of Tipping Point. This is a big day in Israel as the hostages have been released and President Trump is visiting over there. And I have joining me right now our Israel correspondent, Brian Schrager, and we're going to talk about the significance of what's happening today and what's about to happen with all of the Gaza plan and with President Trump and also this summit next week in Egypt. Brian, thank you for joining me today.
It's great to be with you, Jimmy, as always.
Well, it was great to have you. You visited here, and we got to meet in person for the first time when we had our conference here.
It was wonderful.
Yeah, it was great to meet you personally. But thank you so much for all you do for us over there, Brian. It's just, having you there on the ground is just so helpful. But tell me the spirit of what's happening in Israel. This is a huge day. We're all celebrating the release of all the living hostages.
Yeah. Last night in my household here in Katzrein, I'm speaking to you from the Golan Heights. I'm just north of the Kineret, the Sea of Galilee, and the largest settlement up here called Katzrein, which one day will be a proper city. But last night, there was so much emotion in our little household. It was hard to go to bed. We thought maybe the hostages would be released maybe Sunday night, that night. And then we heard 6 a.m. And then in the middle of the night, they said, no, it's going to be like 8 a.m. And so everybody, the whole country is on pins and needles, just desperately waiting for these hostages to be returned. Well, at about 8 o'clock, or a little after, we heard that 7 hostages were being released at one location in Gaza, and they were being turned over by Hamas to the Red Cross. And we, unlike other hostage release events, there wasn't any program. Hamas was forbidden to do anything to kind of broadcast or glorify the return of the hostages and their captivity. Instead, they were under part of the agreement was they could not do that. So we didn't really see very much. We saw Magen David. No, not Magen David. We saw Red Cross ambulances going to the location to pick up the hostages. We saw them drive out. Then the hostages did not go straight to Israel. They said they went to an IDF place where they were thoroughly checked. And part of the checking process was to make sure they didn't have explosives on or in their bodies. So they had to go through a scanning process to make sure that they weren't booby traps for Israelis and for their parents, which would have been a horrible thing. So Israel took every precaution, and the IDF checked them, and then they were sent by ambulance to go in and meet with they actually went to hospitals. They were either flown or driven to hospitals in Israel for treatment. So that was at 8:30. And then the second batch of 13 living hostages were released at about 10 o'clock or a little thereafter. They were released from a separate location in Gaza, and it was basically the same procedure. And as all of this was developing, any little glimpse we got of photos just evoked tears. It was like they've been there 2 years. 2 years. It's just in tunnels and dungeons. And what they have to go through now is just mind-boggling. Not the hostages themselves as they come back and God willing, acclimate. And the families also having to acclimate to their loved ones coming back. So it's a big deal. Now, the agreement also said that 20 additional bodies of Israeli hostages who were murdered by Hamas would be returned. We only got 4 of those today. So there are 16 that have not yet been returned. Hamas is trying to argue, or is arguing, well, we can't find them all. We're having trouble locating them. Yeah. And so that's very frustrating. At the same time, Israel released, 1,500 or something like that, prisoners. These are people who are convicted of terrorism. They've been properly convicted in court for terrorist activities. They have murdered Israelis and they're being set free. Some of them were released in Ramallah. I don't think any of them were released in Gaza. I think they were all either in Ramallah in the Palestinian territories. Some were actually sent to other countries. So the one common joke here is that hopefully we sent a few pages along with each of these people.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's one, I read an article this morning that one of the hostages, one of the Palestinian terrorists being released, raped and murdered an Israeli boy and was sentenced to life in prison. And he's now one of the ones being released. So it's just unbelievable.
And that kind of thing is across the board. I mean, that's basically, those are the kinds of people who have been released today.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. So, Brian, now President Trump is there right now. And there was a 4-hour Knesset event where he spoke over an hour and a lot of people spoke. But part of that I watched, I think it was the speaker of the Knesset was just saying, we haven't had anyone like you since Cyrus the Great. And, you're the best friend Israel's ever had and all that stuff. So President Trump, I mean, he's being celebrated really from, would you say from both sides in Israel, just kind of a universal praise for him?
Yes, certainly both sides of the of Jewish parties. I don't know if you saw it, but there was somebody exploded, and Trump had been speaking for just a few minutes, and suddenly there was yelling and there was hustling, and somebody was escorted out. I don't know for sure, but I think it was probably a member of the Knesset who is an Arab,
right,
and is not a fan of Trump,
right.
So that took maybe 2 minutes, and then Trump, after it happened, Trump said, "Well, that was efficient."
He's hard to rattle.
He was on form today. Yeah. So yes, he celebrated on both sides of the aisle, and everybody here is super thrilled that the hostages are coming home.
Well, let's talk about the future of Gaza now, and I want to say there's a 20-point plan. Now, you summarize this into 3 phases, and I want you to talk about that. But what I would say, Brian, to all of our audience that is very attuned to what's happening in Israel, we absolutely are thrilled with the release of the hostages. The rest of the plan stinks, as it relates to ultimately this goes back into Palestinian hands, with international oversight. And so, and when I think of international oversight, I just think of the United Nations, right. And they're just as worthless as they can be. They have funded Hamas, for all these years and made Hamas leadership billionaires. And so talk about the 3 phases now that we're about to enter into.
Well, we've completed phase 1. Phase 1 was release of the hostages. Well, we've almost completed. Not all of the hostages who've been murdered have yet been released. But that was phase 1. Get the hostages out, and then we gave them a bunch of their prisoners that were being held here in prison. Phase 2 then phases 2 and 3. These are 20 points, but they're in 3 phases. So phase 2 and 3 basically is disarmament, and that's it. Let's call it disarmament. Okay. Well, Hamas in the last couple of days has been saying, "We're no way we're letting go of our arms. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. No one's taking away our arms." And the ceasefire, which began 3 days ago. Do you know what's happening in Gaza since that occurred? Since the IDF pulled back, Hamas has basically started a civil war in Gaza. It is murdering people on the streets who they say collaborated with Israel. There are some clans you may know about who said, "Yeah, we would like to get rid of Hamas too. We don't like them either." And they weren't really collaborating with Israel. They didn't love Israel either, but they wanted Hamas to be gone. Well, Hamas is immediately moving to solidify its hold on Gaza by killing these people, summarily executing them in the streets. You can see these things happening in video excerpts that are out on X, on what used to be called Twitter. So Hamas is emphatically, and Hamas is back in control, by the way. Hamas is back in control of Gaza. Okay? So the IDF has backed out. Now, they've all agreed that, that phase 3, then first of all, the phases 2 and 3 have not been negotiated, right? So nobody's come to an agreement on how they're going to do disarmament, phase 2, or a new governance, and rebuilding, which is phase 3.
And see, all of the problem that I have is, first of all, I can't imagine Hamas ever laying down their arms. And if they did, but part of the plan that was being proposed, the plan that has been proposed, was Hamas lay down your arms and they go free. There's no prosecution for them. And so if you can imagine all of these terrorists that hate Israel still being either in Gaza, they could be relocated in a rebuilt Gaza, the same people prepared to do the same thing all over again and to take control of that. And so what I think right now, first of all, I think they're a bunch of murdering thugs. I think they're a bunch of liars that can't be trusted. And so I wouldn't be surprised, Brian, if they take this opportunity to rearm and to reconstitute, to fight Israel again. And then Israel goes back in there and starts fighting them, and the world starts, attacking Israel because of genocide and all that. So you're a journalist. There is so much propaganda against Israel, and the real news is not being reported. And you've done this on your post, from on Tuesdays. Talk about the propaganda against Israel that's coming out.
Well, it's very interesting right now because all of these anti-Israel organizations around the world that have been screaming at Israel for committing genocide and starving people, they don't really quite know what to do. They're stumbling over their tongues a little bit right now because they're actually having to admit, along with the rest of the world, that there were hostages and they were horribly mistreated. One of the best things to come out of this news cycle in all of this is that all the mainstream media sources are saying this. They're acknowledging that these hostages were being held. So the anti-Israel groups don't know what to do. They scream, "Oh, this is all a deception," or Israel's going to turn around and do something, commit more genocide. We can't trust them. But there's perhaps a bit of a pause right now on. They're trying to catch their breath because they've lost kind of the narrative of Israel's committing genocide now that all these Arab nations are agreeing to make peace with Israel and over this Gaza issue. But it's not going away. The anti-Semitism that you and I and everyone has seen explode over the last year, 2 years is, it's still going to grow. It's still out there. And we're going to see creative narratives come up, just as happened after October 7th, October 8th, 9th. They were all saying, it's Israel's fault. Israel either faked it and never really happened, or they wanted it to happen so they could go after the Palestinians. All these narratives came out to make Israel look bad immediately after hundreds of its citizens had been brutally murdered. So anti-Semitism is going to remain, and we need to remain on guard as believers against anti-Semitism, because it's not just happening on the left. It's also happening very much now on the right, and it's happening among those who call themselves Christians. And young people, I think my feeling is that, first of all, young people have been targeted with this narrative for the last 10, 12, 15, 20 years, that the Palestinians are the underdog and Israel's out to take them, and the whole colonialization narrative that Israel moved in and colonized it and they had no right to the land, they stole it, that kind of narrative. And so selling themselves as underdogs is very appealing to a younger generation that's grown up with Star Wars and other things like that. And, they want to fight against the dark force. And so young people have been, and our young people of Christians who support Israel, our children have been persuaded largely by this narrative. There are polls, I can't cite the exact numbers right now, but there have been several polls in the last few years that show the declining support for Israel among evangelicals. Absolutely. Generally,
yes,
but especially among millennials and Gen Xers.
Right. Yeah. It's really unbelievable. My hope was that, when Israel went in and took military control of a large portion of Gaza, And it seemed as though President Trump was supportive of them taking back that land. When Trump said, kind of humorously, well, we're going to turn that into a resort, America's going to take that over, whatever. What he was saying to me in my ears was, we no longer recognize their right to the land. In 2005, we and the United Nations forced Israel out of that land in a land for peace deal. You gave it to the Palestinians. They did not get peace. They got the land, but Israel didn't get peace. And in my mind, well, first of all, it was never their land to begin with. It's God's land. It's Israel's land. But my hope was that Israel would be able to go in, prosecute their war against Hamas, destroy Hamas, take over that land, and then, turn that into a civilized place for Jews and maybe even Palestinians. But now what's going to happen, it seems to me like, Brian, if all three phases operate successfully, that's going to end up being Palestinian land again, overseen by Palestinians with this so-called international group, overseeing them, which is a joke. And you know good and well that Hamas would take over again. And so it's just this endless conundrum that they're involved with. But like the anti-Semitism, whatever Israel does, they're wrong. And when this peace deal was announced and they were saying, stop the war against Gaza and all that, these anti-Israel groups around the world, when they stopped talking about Gaza, they immediately changed their narrative of from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. In other words, calling for the extermination, the genocide of the Jewish people. So these people hate Israel. They're going to hate Israel. Hamas hates Israel. They're going to continue to exist somewhere, now because they've been allowed off the hook for the time being. But God says, in Joel 3, in those days and at that time, when I bring back the captives of Judah and Jerusalem, which was 1948, I'm going to enter into judgment with the nations in the valley of Jehoshaphat on account of my heritage, my people Israel, whom they've scattered around the world, and they've divided up my land. This is God's land, and God is angry. This is what God is saying in the book of Joel. I'm going to enter into judgment with the nations because you've divided up my land. And so this is the anger of God. But what I would say to our, endtimes.com audience here is this is announcing the arrival of Jesus Christ. And I don't know exactly when he's coming, but the anti-Semitism is off the charts. It's never been like this. The wars and rumors of wars, this international situation. Now, there's going to be a summit next week in Egypt. And
no, it's actually today. It's today.
Oh, it's today. And President Trump's going over there today. Talk about that.
There now, perhaps. Yeah.
Yeah. Talk about.
Well, Trump. The whole plan of going to Egypt a few days later was switched because and what happened is Trump decided, no, let's just go straight down to Egypt and do this right away. And so when he was speaking today at the Knesset, after Bibi Netanyahu and others spoke very, very long, before he spoke very, very long, he teased them. He said, I'm not sure they'll still be waiting for us because we're supposed to be there right now, and they might have flown home on their 747s. We will see. It was kind of classic Trump humor. But no, he's gone down there today. And the big thing was everybody was invited, all the Arab nations, and I guess a few European leaders like Macron of France. And then at first it was no Palestinian leadership and no Israeli leadership. Well, then yesterday, lo and behold, Mahmoud Abbas was invited. And Netanyahu still wasn't. And so it was only after Trump landed at Ben Gurion this morning that word came out that al-Sisi, the president of Egypt, issued an invitation to Netanyahu. So apparently he's on his way there too, or is there by now. So they're all meeting together in an attempt to show unity. Another snake in the pile, if you will, is that the key person that Trump turned to make this work was Recep Erdogan, the president of Turkey. Well, Erdogan has been viciously attacking Israel and Netanyahu for years. I mean, the worst kind of anti-Semitism you could ever hear. He has declared his intent to come in and take over Jerusalem at some point down the road. I mean, he's actually been competing, if you will, to take the place of Iran. And so here he's the guy that Trump turned to put pressure on Hamas to make this happen. And again, this all argues that this is not, nobody's intending this to be permanent. It's intended to be a pause, a strategic pause. There was you've heard of the son of Hamas? Yeah, he was interviewed, I believe, just yesterday, and you can find the interview on YouTube. And in that interview, he said, Hamas is not ever going to make peace with Israel. They can't. They won't. In fact, you just used the phrase from the river to the sea, which we've all heard protesters shouting for the last year or more. Do you know where that comes from? It comes directly from the Hamas charter. That's where it says that they will conquer from the river to the sea. It's in their own words, their own charter, their reason for existing. So, yeah, there are problems. There's one more thing I want to draw attention to that I thought was really, really noteworthy, and that is when Trump got up to speak at the Knesset today, he gave the clearest expression of gratitude and credit to God that I have heard anyone make, saying that we, Israel and the United States, we owe thanks to God for doing this. He said that at the beginning and he said it at the end. Even the Israelis who spoke, who tipped the hand to God a bit, were not nearly as clear as he was. And I sat there and thought, wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Really well done.
Well, he's been a huge figure in Israel in his first term and now in this term. And this is just massive. And of course, they said they're going to, nominate him for the Nobel Prize, and I hope he gets it. The troubling thing is, and I'm very thankful for President Trump, the troubling thing is they're still pressuring Israel to give up Gaza, and ultimately. And that's going to be the problem, and that's going to be the problem with God, and that's going to be the linchpin in all of this. But Brian, thank you so much for all that you do for us and keeping us up to date in Israel. And God bless you. And I'll see you soon. And for all of our audience, thank you for being subscribers. Thank you for all you do for us. And we just wanted to give you an update today because we are absolutely celebrating the release of these hostages and praying for all of those that have been murdered to also be released, those bodies. But just be praying for Israel, be praying for this so-called peace plan. This is such a troubling time for them. But I'm just saying, Jesus is coming. All the things that are happening right now. Look at the world attention right now, all on the nation of Israel. Exactly. All the nations of the world today are focused on Israel and have been for years. This is exactly what the Bible said would happen. So we're going to keep you up to date on this, but thank you for tuning into this special edition of Tipping Point. God bless you.